El primero, este es Shatter Me, el libro número 1. El segundo libro es Unravel Me. Este es bastante más grueso, la verdad, comparado al otro. Aquí está. Es el de Ignite Me, que honestamente creo que es la portada que más me gusta, me parece muy bonita. That video you just watched was me unboxing and talking about me reading Shatter Me for the first time ever on this exact same day 2 years ago. And yes, I'm wearing the same jacket. Hello, beautiful person. If you don't know me, my name is Aya, and if you do know me, I'm glad you're back. If you know anything about me, you know that my favorite series in the entire world is the Shatter Me series or the Huramafi. This series is the reason why I have any social media platforms dedicated to books, especially my TikTok. I used to record just like a bunch of videos talking to my close friends, and I would post them on my private Instagram stories. I don't know if anybody actually paid attention to them, but I had so much fun doing them. This is before I had my TikTok account, any followers. This series is the reason why you're watching this video right now and any other video of mine, and I still love it so much after all this time, which is why I decided back then that I would just create this new tradition where I would sit down on the 23rd of the second month of every year and I would pick up any Shatter Me book and I would just have to start reading that day. I don't have to finish it in one day. I would just need to read anything Shatter Me related on the 23rd. Last year I started with the first book and I finished the year reading Restore Me. So a few days ago I decided to read Shadow Me, which is the novella 4.5 in the series, so I could just jump right into my favorite book in the series, which is book number 5, Defy Me. And you guys are gonna be here with me for the reread. Today is kind of complicated because last year I managed to just rot in bed and just read my book all day and then re-annotate. I was so excited. Today, however, we're going out to celebrate my friend's birthday, so I'm gonna be out all day. But before we leave, we're gonna be choosing the tabs and the highlighters and the pens to annotate everything all over again, because one of my favorite things about rereading my favorite books is that I always notice things that I didn't the first time. I do have a goal of finishing this book in at least 3 days, and I know this may not sound like anything too crazy, which in my opinion it's not. Sometimes I finish books in one day, but I do have to go to university, I do have some lectures, and I'm gonna be outside, so it's gonna be kind of hard to read and film at the same time. Hopefully I get to do all of this plus editing before this Wednesday. I think that's my mom blow drying her hair, so we're gonna ignore that because I really don't have time. Okay, so here are the tabs. I have a bunch of opened ones and a bunch of ones that I have not opened for like forever. Back then, the Shatter Me series was the first series I ever annotated, so I just didn't have like a clear system of how I was supposed to do things. This one is like one of the most like annotated ones. The other ones barely had like 3 tabs, and I was like, oof, that's too much. Back then, I was terrified of writing on my books, so I just bought like those like transparent sticky notes. 2 years later, I don't care. These are my books. These are my babies. And I will underline and highlight everything that I absolutely love about it. Right, so like I said, I hated writing on them, so I would just like stick everything. We have one for like sad moments. We have another one for quotes that I love. We have another one for shocking moments or like moments that give me chills or like plot twists. We have like the funny entertaining scenes, romantic or sweet moments, and finally random stuff I just like to keep track of. I don't think this time I'm gonna take a tab for like shocking moments or like plot twists because I already know what happens. I think I'm gonna be focusing on quotes, maybe romantic and sweet moments, and random stuff I'd like to keep track of. I'm gonna try to match the colors, and in case I can't, I'll just take whatever. Okay, so quotes is a literal white. No, it's a little purple. I mean, this is white, but I don't have a lot of it. I'll just use this one for now. I just take like an empty plastic thingy and I just put them on there. Back then, I chose these colors based on the cover. I still do that. I mean, I think it was a good match. It's like a very neutral type of cover. Romantic and sweet, it's like a dark blue. Finding the exact colors is a nightmare, let me tell you that much. These. No? Random stuff I like to keep track of. This is like the most common color. Like I said before, this is my favorite book in the series. I'm kind of nervous. I never know if they're going to be as good as I remember them, but the other books have not disappointed me. I know this book is gonna make me cry, so it makes me so emotional. I'm such an emotional and nostalgic person. Like, this may seem a little stupid to everybody, but this is a way for me to find some kind of comfort in a story that I love so much. It's almost time for me to leave, so I'm not gonna have time to start reading right now, but I'll be back tonight and I'll definitely start reading, because what's the whole point of doing it on the 23rd if I'm not gonna start reading it on the 23rd? See you in a few hours. It is currently 11:22 p.m. We've still got time to start reading the book. I do feel the need to clarify that this video will have spoilers. Just make sure to understand that I will be discussing a lot of things that might be spoilers for you. Alright, chapter 1, Kenji. Okay, so one of my favorite things about the second trilogy is how graphic everything just becomes. We're talking about chests butterflied open. Like, everything is so graphic. It gives me the chills. Sometimes I forget how small they were when they started, being so abused. These flashbacks of little Aaron and little Juliet are gonna be the death of me. Like, I hold these scenes so close to my heart. They make me so emotional. I think a lot of people try to argue that Juliet should have never tried to be a Supreme Commander or anything like that, and I understand. I know where they're coming from. She was unprepared, but I feel like people tend to overlook the fact that the reason why everybody just decided to follow a new leader, it was because it was Juliet. I think Juliet had a way with words. I think Juliet had a very relatable image. Maybe I'm looking too deep into this, but I like it. That's what I do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that she was relatable and she was transparent enough that you could tell that she had good intentions. I don't think that's something any of the other characters could actually convey. And I mean, Warner was overqualified to be Supreme Commander, right? He was Anderson's son, but still he didn't have a way with people the way Juliet did. And I think that's a very strong point that people tend to overlook when the fandom debates whether she should have tried to take the position or not. James is so smart. I'm glad I'm doing a reread of at least part of the series before Watch Me comes out in April. A lot of these things just make sense for James, especially because every time James tries to add something to the conversation, like a theory or maybe a plan or something, Adam is so uncomfortable. He does not want to be here. And, I get that for him. I understand. We obviously still don't know anything about James and how he grew up and why he made those decisions, but from what I'm reading right now, I think it makes total sense. So I personally think everybody should do a small reread before reading Watch Me. Guys, Juliet had an accent. I keep forgetting that she had an accent. I keep forgetting that she's from New Zealand. It's Mr. Anderson, my social worker. Can you guys imagine Paris Anderson as a social worker? It's just this ordinary, normal social worker that has his client's best interest in mind. The reason he had to keep wiping their memories was because it didn't matter how many times he reset the story or remade the introductions. Aaron always fell in love with her. Every time. But they were always drawn together. They were like magnets. This is why their love story will always be my favorite. This quote right here is the reason why this book means everything to me. Okay, I know we all hate Paris Anderson. Terrible person, even worse father. But we have to give credit where it's due, and it's that this guy is so insanely smart that it still blows my mind how he orchestrated the whole thing and how he made Aaron believe that he was making all of the decisions as a chief commander and regent of Sector 45. And he knew their personalities so well that he knew that Adam had this protective side that would want to help Juliet in her cell. Another thing I love is watching my reactions the first time that I read it. No effing way, this is effing insane. And this is after Grandpa gets shot right in the forehead and Kenji says Anderson is here. Insane. I might have fallen asleep. It's the next day, I'm drinking my coffee, and we're gonna keep reading. Yesterday, I did read a bunch. I didn't get to 50% of the book, but I'm definitely gonna be finishing it today. I did want to mention something that I noticed, and it's the reason why I love doing rereads so much. Okay, so I feel like at this point, it's pretty obvious that Aaron and Juliet already knew each other, right? We know their memories have been wiped and everything. But when we go to Warner's chapter, there's Aaron and Juliet meeting after some time, right? They were kids. He's probably like around 17 and she's 16, something like that. And Anderson says this one line that I feel like everybody in the fandom pretty much already knows. And it's, you kids remember each other, right? If you go to Unravel Me in like chapter 69, because I looked it up yesterday, because I knew that I underlined that line last year when I reread Unravel Me, and he says it right here. You kids remember each other, right? She's showing us, and it's not about the fact that she's showing us that they know each other, because we already know that. It's more about the foreshadowing, and it's so subtle that you don't even notice unless you reread these two books. Insane. To her, Muffy, honestly, mother. After the huge flashback where Anderson is telling Aaron, hey, you're gonna be watching this girl and you're gonna study her and you're gonna weaponize her, but you're not gonna know that this is any of my idea. You're gonna think that this is your idea. We're now in the present with Aaron. He's being isolated. He's being poisoned every day with little food. And he says, I know they'll expect me to prove that I deserve to survive. And unexpectedly, knowing this brings me a much needed sense of calm. I feel none of my usual anxiety here, being carefully poisoned to death. Instead, I feel at home, familiar. And as stupid as it sounds to bring this up, because it might seem obvious to some of us that read these books, but to others I've noticed that it's not that obvious. Something that people tend to complain about when it comes to Aaron's character is, if everybody has been so abused and so mistreated, then why is it that he's the only one that is like this basically asshole to everybody that just does not know how to live with the rest? People tend to ignore this so much. People tend to ignore that this is basically how he has been raised. And a lot of the other children of the Supreme Commanders, they have brothers and sisters, they have siblings. Aaron has nobody, and the only person that he had kept being erased from his memories over and over again. He genuinely does not know how to talk to anybody. This is what he's been taught to do. Nazira had her brother, there's the other twins, and Lena, who's another only child. She is a horrible person. We don't like her. And I'm laughing, but it's so sad that this is where he's like, I feel at home. This is familiar. This is what I know how to do. I'm not even nervous because this is the only thing I've been trained to do. Breaks my heart, honestly. Not to mention that Aaron's grandpa, I'm not gonna pronounce his name because we all know how that goes. When he was confessing everything to the Omega Point group before he was, he did say that out of all like the Supreme Commanders, Paris Anderson specifically found some kind of twisted satisfaction from torturing his kid and abusing his kid to no end. For example, Juliet's parents, they torture her with a goal, which is, to get to, her maximum capacity or her abilities to fulfill the experiment. At least there's something, I guess, to gain from that, even though it's still terrible. Like, I cannot even express how utterly evil that is. Aaron's grandpa says that Anderson specifically, he got this, weird satisfaction from torturing his son like no other. Like, this guy has been through hell and back. I feel like people just expect him to change just because he fell in love. That's not how it works. And Juliet was like the only constant in his life, which is the reason why I think he felt so at ease with her, even though their memories kept being wiped over and over again. They even mention it in here. And he says, I feel so at ease with her. She seems so familiar to my heart, but my brain knows this is too stupid. This is crazy. Like, I obviously don't know this girl. I just don't know why I feel like this with her. Yeah! Whoever said that Juliet had it coming in Unravel Me when Kenji put her in her place because she was such a crybaby. I want you guys to go back to this book because Kenji is now at the asylum where Juliet was at the beginning of the series, and he's saying, hey, I've been through a lot of stuff, but this is a different kind of torture. And in my opinion, her being a crybaby was completely understandable. In my head, it was so normal. Like her reactions, her personality, her attitude after being locked up for almost an entire year was so understandable. Today is Tuesday and I finished the book yesterday. I want to apologize because I did have intentions of filming more, but I got so into the book that I completely forgot that I was filming this YouTube video. I was really into the story. I was really just focusing on reading and enjoying the book, so I apologize for that. But for this last part of the video, I would like to give you some of my general thoughts or what I think about this book after reading it for the second time ever. First of all, I cried a lot. There were like happy tears and very sad tears, but I did cry a lot. So that's a really good sign if that tells you anything about how I feel about this book after rereading it. Maybe this is not as general, but I did want to talk about my perception of the characters. It's not that I see these characters any differently, but I do think that a lot of like my previous opinions were reinforced even more after reading it for a second time. One of my opinions being, for example, that a lot of people complain about Juliet being too whiny or like a crybaby. I think I've talked about this before. And after reading this book, like the amount of mutilation and abuse that this girl had to endure, not only in this book, but like throughout the entire series, but especially with the events in this one, I will forever be a defender that Juliet Ferrars has every right to cry and whine about how hard her life is. It's not Juliet who stops being emotional, it's the complete opposite. It's Kenji who becomes more emotional and realizes that sometimes you just have to sit and talk about your feelings. And let's not forget the fact that Juliet was in isolation for almost an entire year and all she had was her journal. Like she had nothing better to do. She would just sit down and write on her journal and reflect on her feelings and her experiences because she had nobody to talk to. Which brings me to my next point, and it's how a lot of the arcs of each individual character tends to be very overlooked by the fandom or the readers, because a lot of these points that I've mentioned are not something that I just discovered or realized, but I've noticed a lot of these details about each character tends to be overshadowed by the romance in the story. And like, I understand, like the romance is, oh my god, but it's such a shame because these characters are so well written. There's so much depth and emotion to them. It makes them complete. There's a lot of attention, there's a lot of care put into how each of their minds work, and all of that is overshadowed by the couples. It's never just Aaron, it's always Aaron and Juliet. How Aaron feels about Juliet, what Aaron does for Juliet, how Aaron interacts with the group. And it's something that people tend to complain about a lot, and it's how Aaron does not make an effort to integrate himself into the group. It's always, oh, I only care about Juliet and I don't care about the rest, when all of that is explained and it's justified in the book. And I know a lot of people are going to say it's not that deep, but I think the Harumafi has proved over and over again that she does pay attention to detail. An example being back in Unravel Me at the end, when Anderson tells Juliet and Aaron, you kids remember each other, right? Because I read this and I literally ran to my bookshelf to take Unravel Me to write down the chapter. And Unravel Me is chapter 69, and I cannot tell you guys the chapter in Defy Me, but it's page 139 in my edition at least. Which brings me to my next and possible last point, and it's my appreciation towards the Harumafi's writing. I think she's extremely talented at conveying emotion. I know a lot of people don't really like or are not very fond of her writing style because it's very poetic. There's a lot of purple prose, but I think that's what makes these characters so easily likable, what makes it so easy to empathize with them. So much that at times it becomes almost overwhelming because you actually understand and feel the emotions they're describing. I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous to reread this book because I've mentioned 100 times that this is my favorite in the series, but I am aware that I'm a very nostalgic person, and I know that sometimes nostalgia makes things a lot better than they actually are. So I was nervous because I was thinking, this is supposed to be my favorite book in the series. If it's not as good as I remember it, what am I gonna do? But I don't know why I was so worried. It was just as perfect as I remember it. I'm also a very emotional reader, so I tend to become very emotionally attached to stories and characters. But trust me when I say this, I've read so many books in these past 2 years since I read this one for the first time ever, and to this day I still have not found a single story story like this one. I don't think I'll ever find characters like these. This is it. This is it for me. This is my book. This is my series, which is the reason why I'm gonna maintain this tradition. I don't know if I'll keep reading the rest of the series next year or if I'll probably just finish what's left before Watch Me comes out in April. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Consider following me on my other social media platforms. They're all linked down in the description. Like and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you guys. I always appreciate your support, and I'll see you next week.